Hey, Sydney, could you show me the sign, please? Perfect. She's done.
Okay, the hearing will come to order. We're here to hear from the public about House Study Bill 671. We are scheduled to go until 6:30 if necessary. We will hear from each speaker for a maximum of 3 minutes. If you see this green sign, it means you've got 30 seconds to go. And we'll start with Mr. Malvin.
Dennis Lauber of Clinton, Iowa.
Proceed, please.
When people question if the governor's tax proposal changes will make Iowa look like Kansas, I pay attention because I am an Iowan with a unique perspective on this issue. In December of 2014, I finished 25 years as a local Chamber of Commerce executive in Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas, the last 8 years in my native state of Kansas. While I was there, I was twice elected as the board chair of the Trade Association of Economic Development Professionals, and 1 year I was elected as the board chair of the Trade Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives. I spent a lot of time with the governor, the Secretary of Revenue, legislative leadership, and others as they developed the Kansas tax policy. I was even invited to a special task force of the Kansas Senate to help develop tax policy recommendations. All of my recommendations were ignored, and you know what happened in Kansas. So in light of that, I just want to share with you 6 quick comments and observations about Iowa's and the proposal before you. I encouraged Governor Brownback as I sat in his car one day. I said, call Governor Branstad, learn about single-factor sales, and understand why that is a great approach to take in corporate policy. He chose not to do that. And as I watched things unfold as Grover Norquist came out last summer and said, don't ever cut taxes like Kansas. Look at North Carolina. They phased in single-factor sales. So I've come to the conclusion that I have a hunch a fair number of high percentage of policymakers really don't understand what makes single-factor sales such a great approach to corporate tax policy. So when we're all said and done and you've adjourned, I'll hang out somewhere in the room. I've got show and tell graphics, sales tax or single-factor sales 101 that I could help somebody understand why that's the great approach that Governor Branstad signed into the law his first term in office. Second, tax cuts should be phased in with specific triggers. Economist Arthur Laffer was interviewed by a Kansas newspaper. He was specifically asked about my concerns. And he said, yeah, he's got a point, but I can't be expected to get into details. Details matter when it comes to tax policy. The governor's proposal phases in the tax cuts and has triggers to either speed them up or slow them down. That's a great approach to have. I think that it should continue, and I'm about out of time. So I would just say I agree and support the idea of internet taxing or taxing internet purchases. The availability of qualified labor is the biggest impediment to long-term growth. The Future Ready Iowa initiative is a great idea. And last, I would say extension and expansion of the workforce housing tax credit program will be a great thing to help with labor availability, because when unemployment's at 3%, labor availability, especially in non-metro cities, will be important. I'm here to help, and I look forward to trying to help create a better tax policy for the state of Iowa. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
No questions. Thank you.
You next, Sam.
My name is Ann Disher, and I'm the Executive Director of the Child and Family Policy Center, and I guess I'm here with maybe a little bigger picture approach to this issue today. Our organization advocates for policies that improve child and family outcomes in Iowa, and that's why we're opposed to House Study Bill 671. We believe kids are the basis for our state's future civic and economic well-being, and Iowa needs a pragmatic budget that helps children and their families thrive. And because of that, needs a tax system that generates the revenue that supports a pragmatic budget. The governor's tax bill hinders Iowa's ability to do these things. Her plan would make annual reductions to the general fund, projected at up to $300 million. Cuts like these would inevitably reduce Iowa's ability to do the things that we know we need to do, like make our foster care system work better for kids and improve our children's mental health system. Frankly, our state is already struggling to keep up, and I have quick three examples. Early Childhood Iowa, the state's cross-system initiative that supports the needs of infants, toddlers, and preschoolers, has not seen a budget increase since it, like most state agencies, saw a 10% budget cut in 2008. It's 2018. Supplemental school aid for our K-12 system has been held to about an average of 1.7% growth over the last 9 years. That's far below the support needed to meet rising costs associated with running a school district. Our state's child care assistance program has among the nation's lowest family eligibility rates. It reimburses participating providers, which are small businesses and nonprofits in every corner of our state, based on the 2004 market rate, plus a few tiny increases over the years that bring it up to about the 2006 market rate. And again, it's 2018. These are just a few of the public services that keep Iowa children safe and healthy and help families stay in and succeed in the workforce. And they are already under stress. New tax cuts would make things worse. And I guess I do want to talk about the Kansas example. The tax policies might look slightly different, but the end result is decreased revenue to do the important things we know for kids and families. In Kansas, big tax cuts were supposed to unleash economic growth. Instead, they brought years of budget cuts that decimated public services. Between 2012 and last year, when Kansas lawmakers repealed the worst of the cuts under extraordinary pressure for Kansans who saw what was happening to their state and did not like it. Job growth in the state actually lagged far behind the U.S. average and behind that of its neighbors, including Iowa. I guess I see this as the moment where Iowans will decide if we follow Kansas down that destructive path or continue our state's pragmatic, traditional approach to governing, and I certainly urge you to pick the pragmatic Iowa approach. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Amy Boozell. I'm a mother of five.
Push that button.
I'm sorry. Okay. Hi, my name's Amy Boozell. I'm a mother of five, and I work at the Boys and Girls Club of Story County. I know firsthand how important it is that we fight to allow working families to keep more of their hard-earned paychecks. I see many low and medium income families in my day-to-day work. For many Iowans, a few extra dollars in their paycheck can put extra gas in their cars or buy groceries. I'm fully supportive of the federal deductibility being phased out. Also, Iowa has one of the highest income tax rates. By removing this deduction, Iowa refunds have the potential to go up, and therefore helping families to sometimes buy things they need, like a new car or other things they might need to buy. I also strongly agree with her plan to give Iowa teachers the educator expense deduction. Our teachers devote their lives to teaching our children, and quite often a large portion of their own paychecks to buy supplies for their classrooms and often supplies for children who can't afford their own supplies. And we need to give them that deduction for the expense that they spend out, just like we would for someone who owns their own business for those expenses. Iowa thrives on small businesses, which we all know, and if we invest in these small businesses by lowering taxes, they can expand, invest, and hire more people, and this would create more jobs, encourage further entrepreneurship, and create new revenue and jobs for our state. I support her tax plan also because I believe that in Iowa, our citizens should be able to spend their own hard-earned money the way that they want, and I want to see our economy grow more. And by putting the money in the hands of our citizens to spend and create revenue that way, I feel that it would help our economy grow.
Thank you. Sure.
Hello, I'm Mike Owen, I'm the Executive Director of the Iowa Policy Project. Speaking for or against legislation isn't typically something we do at our organization. We try to help people understand elements of it so they can decide for themselves what's best. But we do have some observations about the governor's bill as it stands. Number one is it reduces revenues at a time when, as you all know, you have been facing mid-year budget cuts. This violates a basic principle about taxes, and that is revenue adequacy. The budget that you folks put together was not supported by our tax system as it was. Now, under the governor's proposal, you're looking at well over $1.5 billion over the time of the proposal, $300 million in 1 year. That is a real problem of revenue adequacy. Next thing to look at is the fact that the governor's bill does not address the rampant spending we have on tax credits in this state, which have doubled in 5 years. Get that again, that's doubled from $200 million to $400 million in business tax credits in 5 years. On top of that, the governor's plan does not deal with the lingering problem of corporate tax loopholes, which need to be plugged and by old estimates cost us in the neighborhood of $100 million a year. So these are issues not only of revenue adequacy, but of accountability in our tax system. These are both problems with violations of basic tax principles. And finally, we note that the governor's plan, though not as much as the Senate, does some expansions on tax preferences for seniors. Now, seniors have very good, they have a real good deal in our tax code the way it is. And we need to be thinking about how to make our taxes based more on ability to pay, based on the income, regardless of the age of the taxpayer or the source of the income. So this is an equity issue. Now, fairness is a basic principle, and that's just one element of it. In Iowa, our tax system of state and local taxes takes more from lower and middle income people than from higher income people. And you could do this differently. Now, a couple of the things in the governor's plan are things that we think are steps forward. Dealing with federal deductibility is an important step. And raising the standard deduction is an important step. Modifying the sales tax to make a more level playing field for retailers on our main streets is an important step. I would note that if you dealt with corporate tax loopholes, you also would be helping those Main Street businesses get a more level playing field.
Sir, your time is up.
Thank you very much.
My name is John Dunwell from Newton, Iowa. Just a private citizen, a businessman, and I've worked part of my career in the nonprofit world. I hailed originally from Minnesota, and then married a gal from Newton, Iowa, and ended up moving to Orlando, Florida, where I lived 21 years. And 7 years ago, we decided to come back to Newton, Iowa. Many people from Florida ask why. And part of it is because we love Iowa. It's a great place. It's a hidden gem that most people don't understand what it's all about. As I'm here today to speak about maybe lowering our taxes, about changing how we collect those taxes or do those taxes, part of my concern is the growth of our state. What are we going to do to attract new workers and new businesses, which I believe ultimately will generate more income that can go to pay taxes within our particular state. And so I believe we need to address some of these issues after not having a tax cut in 20 years, ranking pretty high in the Midwestern states, to make us more attractive, to meet the challenges that are before us. I think it's imperative upon us to take a look at maybe changing some of those things that could become hindrances to what we're trying to accomplish in our state. The second thing is, I just would also like to say is, I wanted to make us more resilient. One of the joys of me moving back to Newton, Iowa is living close to my father-in-law, who's a phenomenal businessman, been in business 38 years. You know what Newton went through when Maytag left and the challenges that faced our community. I've spent many an hour talking with my father-in-law, why did his business survive? Why is he still thriving into the second generation with his business? And he tells me over and over again, it's not just about raising revenue, it was about controlling costs. And I recognize as we take a look at what's happened with a lot of fixed costs in our state, things like Medicaid and other entitlement programs, which are very, very important, we've got some impending challenges ahead of us. And we need to become resilient, or what Nathan Taylor, the economist, talks about being anti-fragile. We can actually thrive in the midst of challenging times. And so to prepare us for the future, I think we need to take a look at lowering taxes and making some changes about how we do things along that area. The last issue is just simply this. I work hard for my money. I spend most of my life on the road traveling 7 states. I'm in the financial services industry and trying to encourage people with investments in their life. And part of what I will tell you is I would like the privilege to use more of my resources to make a difference in my community. You guys have a tough job and you do great things and you accomplish an awful lot. But I actually believe I can do the same thing with my family in some degree and also in my community through utilizing my own resources rather than paying a higher tax rate. I'm a fan of government knowing its limitations. I'm a fan of getting rid of deductions and lowering our taxes and making them more simple. And thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. My name is Helen Pierce, and I'm CEO of Cedar Falls Community Credit Union. First, I'd like to thank Governor Reynolds and the Iowa House of Representatives on working on a tax bill that helps hardworking Iowans keep more of their money. Credit unions were founded around the cooperative idea of making access to credit as affordable as possible. So that our mission is very aligned with your state legislative goals. Unfortunately, the Senate tax reform bill included a tax on 20 credit unions who serve 600,000 members, including mine. I urge the House to reject the Senate language. Under the Senate bill, our credit union will be taxed about 50% more. And that is not tax relief. Unfortunately, this means that our members may pay more for their car loans and their home loans. The only group advocating to tax credit unions more are the banks. They have 90% of the market share and they have record profits. They are definitely not disadvantaged by credit unions. Further, banks and credit unions pay nearly the same amount of taxes. The banks pay taxes on their income, credit unions pay taxes on their reserves. Credit unions, regardless of size, maintain the not-for-profit cooperative structure that is different from banks that are controlled by a group of stockholders. Credit unions' unique corporate business model saved Iowans 1.1 million credit union members $100 million last year versus fees and rates that they may have paid at a bank. Under the guise of tax equity, banks are trying to eliminate the credit union's choice. Without a not-for-profit marketplace, there would be no checks and balances, and the banks could charge fees and rates that were higher. Lastly, if the larger credit unions decided to change to a federal charter that has a better tax climate, that would make the state lose out on sales tax money and also the money in credit taxes that we pay. That would have a negative impact on the smaller credit unions, who then would have to make up the difference and pay for our credit union division. I want to thank you again for your work on real tax reform. We hope your efforts provide tax relief for all, and we will be there to support them on behalf of Iowa's 101 million credit union members. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen of the Iowa House. My name is Jen Kingland, and I'm the contract lobbyist for the Iowa Taxpayers Association. The Iowa Taxpayers Association has long advocated for sound tax policy. ITA is a professional resource and network of tax policy experts, educators, and advocates for sound fiscal policy to stimulate economic growth. ITA would like to thank Governor Reynolds, the House and the Senate members for allowing us an opportunity to make recommendations to improve Iowa's tax law. House Study Bill 671 is a step in the right direction to help achieve some of these goals. ITA supports reforming Iowa's antiquated tax code and making it more neutral, competitive, fair, simple, and consistent. A strong foundation for an effective tax structure should be built on these above principles that will stand the test of time. Iowa's individual top marginal rate is one of the highest in the nation. The individual income tax applies to individuals and many small businesses as well, as corporations, LLCs, partnerships, and sole proprietorships. Any changes made to the individual income tax should take into consideration the ramifications to these small businesses, their need to maintain a sound tax structure for stability, economic growth, and jobs for Iowans. Although corporate income taxes are not addressed in House Study Bill 671, Iowa continues to have the highest corporate rate in the nation. ITA supports efforts by the legislature to achieve corporate tax reform as well. The highest corporate tax rate and the perception of Iowa being a high-tax state is an impediment to businesses looking to relocate jobs to Iowa. Finally, ITA believes tax reform should create consistency and give future legislatures the ability to change our tax laws unfettered by federal changes that may occur. Now that the federal government has passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, Iowa needs to act now to reform its own state tax code. With no action, many Iowans and Iowa businesses will see an increase in the amount of state income taxes they will owe for the year 2018, which could further hamper Iowa's economic growth. We should all agree that any decision to raise or lower Iowa income tax should be made by Iowa lawmakers with input from Iowa taxpayers and not the federal government. ITA encourages the Iowa legislature to understand the impacts the federal laws will change and have on Iowans and their tax liability. Then eliminate the antiquated deduction with corresponding rate reductions. The time to act is now. The ITA appreciates the work you are doing to help move Iowa forward and toward a more stable, tax-friendly Iowa. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the Iowa House, my name is Brad Hudson and I am with the Iowa State Education Association. I am here on behalf of our 34,000 members and the students that they serve across the state in our public schools, our area education agencies, and our community colleges to express their strong opposition to this bill. The members of the Iowa State Education Association believe that this bill is illogical and borders on the brink of insanity. In recent years, this body and the Senate have had to make mid-year reductions impacting key services to Iowans. In particular, you've made cuts to higher education, especially the community colleges. In fact, they were just cut $500,000 just a few weeks ago. If we want a well-trained workforce, this bill is just illogical. In addition, this body and the Senate have provided some of the lowest allowable growth rates over the last 8 years. The governor and some here have argued that K-12 have seen large increases. This is not true. The 20.6% growth figure touted by some includes an accounting error for the school sales tax for infrastructure. When this accounting error is corrected, the growth for the last 7 years for K-12 was 4.9% or 0.7% per year. But I'm not here to debate statements made in the past. I'm here to talk about the future. In the next fiscal year, schools were granted allowable growth of 1%. All that could be forwarded in these hard economic times was the storyline. This amounted to $46 million, including per pupil equity and transportation equity. This paltry funding for public schools placed 183 school districts on the budget guarantee. That's 55% of the schools in Iowa. I now look at this bill in front of us. This bill would decrease total revenues by $1.7 billion, which is a 23% reduction. It is clear to me, my members, the students that we serve, and their parents, that your priority is to millionaires and out-of-state corporations, not Iowa's children, who are the future of this great state. I ask you to stop this illogical bill and do right by our kids and provide additional resources for education. Before you make Iowa the next West Virginia or Oklahoma or Arizona. Thank you for your time.
My name is Gary Loveforth. I'm a concerned citizen here today. 32 years ago, my wife and I moved here from Minnesota. Moved to Iowa because there was too many mosquitoes, it was too cold, the taxes were too high in Minnesota. I'm sure there's less mosquitoes here and the taxes are lower, but we're not so sure about the cold after this last week. We were thankful that we have a governor and a legislators that are looking at taxes, not at all due respect to the gentleman before us, but you know, we're the taxpayers. We're the people out there. I cut off of a job early to be here today. And when you're self-employed, I've been self-employed for 35 years, and you pay both halves of Social Security, you pay both halves, our medical insurance alone is $1,500 a month. You're gonna work hard every month just to make the ends meet. The way I look at it, the federal government said, you know what, according to one of the government officials, the federal government giving us crumbs. I look at what the state of Iowa is doing here to cut our taxes, and I said, you know what, I appreciate what you're doing. You're putting a little gravy on my taters. I told my wife the other day, I said, look, if we keep getting crumbs from the federal government, and the state of Iowa keeps putting a little gravy on our taters, pretty soon we're going to have enough to go out and get a meal. It's going to be a good deal for the state of Iowa. I think also this way, my son, he's in the military, he's captain in the Army. He was born in Iowa, raised in Iowa, and he called me one day and he says, Dad, I'm changing my state residency, my state citizen, or where I'm resident. And I said, son, why are you doing that? He says, Dad, I love Iowa. I was born here, raised here. But he said, you know what? I'm in the military. I'm in Texas right now. And guess what? I pay no state income taxes. It's costing me $6,000 a year to say that I am an Iowa citizen. Talk to the governor about it. I think that's one of the things you might want to take a look at in the future. I also think this way, that, you know, I know that before the House right now that there's a bill about the 10-day beating heart. One of the goals of the state of Iowa is to attract new businesses and have new citizens. We've got more new citizens. We've got to let them be born. I want to challenge our House representatives to look at that beating heart bill and let that thing come through. We've got more citizens. We just got to let them be born. We got to let them grow. We got to show that we trust and we value life in the state of Iowa. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you so much for your time. I congratulate each and every one of you for the amount of time that you spent here away from your families doing a good public service. Thank you so much.
Good evening. I'm Dave Nelson, CEO and Chairman of West Bank, headquartered in West Des Moines. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and comment on this important matter of tax reform. Iowa's current tax and regulatory inequities in the financial sector has greatly contributed to the rapid growth of large non-income tax-paying credit unions in Iowa. During the past 20 years, the credit union's share of Iowa insured depository earnings rose from 5% to 20%. That amounts to an annual loss of nearly $10 million from state bank franchise tax collections. As non-income tax-paying credit unions grow, so grows the cost of the exemption to the taxpayers of Iowa. This is much more than an industry inequity. Iowans are asking for a rationale and justification for why large and highly profitable businesses do not pay income taxes like everyone else. The answer is, there is no longer a justification, and now you have the opportunity to act. Iowans are realizing that whether you're sharing the cost of a meal at a restaurant or the cost of government, when some are allowed not to pay for themselves, the rest of us pay more. Iowa's mega credit unions look very different from the traditional credit unions they hide behind. They no longer have a common bond of membership. Anybody can be a member. DePaco in Dubuque operates in all 50 states plus 19 countries. Mega credit unions have also unlimited commercial business lending authority. It was granted by their unelected regulator, and the impact has been significant expansion in their commercial loan portfolios with significant increase in the cost of their tax exemption without any vote from elected officials. In my marketplace, credit unions are very active in financing large commercial projects. A new commercial strip mall on the corner of 128th and University in Clive, a high-rise commercial office building downtown 6th and Grand, and many more across the metro area.
Credit unions were given their tax exemption status in 1934 during the Great Depression as a means to provide small consumer loans through an employer-sponsored credit union. Things have changed during the last 80 years. Today, the largest financial institution in Iowa is the University of Iowa Community Credit Union. No affiliation, of course, with the real University of Iowa. It is also the most profitable financial institution in the state. It made $70 million from its members last year. That is $70 million of retained profits, not distributed to members either through rates or dividends. Credit union members wear t-shirts that say how much they love their credit union. And I think that's great. They should continue to bank there. But how about if they also happen to love their grocery store? Should then they also be exempt from paying income taxes? There's simply no justification for this tax exemption and this corresponding cost to our state.
Sir,
It's really kind of simple.
Mr. Nelson, your time's up, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Good evening, my name is Tyler Olson. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the Iowa Solar Energy Trade Association. Appreciate having a few minutes of your time this evening. I'm here today to talk in favor of the Solar Energy System Tax Credit. The credit has been a huge success since it began in 2012. It's already led to over $160 million in capital investment through 2017 and hundreds of new jobs. Iowa's solar tax credit is also set up responsibly to limit its impact on the state budget. There's an annual cap of $5 million, and the state tax credit is linked to the federal tax credit, which means it will begin a 2-year phase out after 2019. The 2017 $5 million annual cap is set to be topped by $7 million in qualifying projects, meaning that $2 million will roll over to 2018. The solar energy system tax credit's economic success, responsible budget impact, and popularity would actually justify increasing the annual cap if funds allowed. The state solar tax credit has broad economic impact. Nearly 700 Iowa jobs are supported by the credit. In 2016, job growth in the solar industry topped 60%. In 2017, Iowa had the third fastest growing job market in solar in the country, growth topped 45%. Over $166 million in capital investment has occurred from $21.6 million in tax credits from 2012 to 2017. That's $7.40 of capital investment for every $1 in tax credit that the state allows, which is a pretty good return on investment. The state tax credit's impact is also spread widely. There have been projects in all 99 counties since 2012, almost 3,500 projects total statewide. Again, the tax credit has a responsible impact on the state budget as you work towards managing that and passing the budget for this year. A current annual tax credit limit, it's non-refundable, and a 2-year phase out beginning in 2019. The tax credit's economic success, its contribution to job growth in the state, and its limited budget impact deserves recognition, I think, and should continue. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Craig Ibsen, and I run Next Level Ventures, an investment fund located in Des Moines. I'm speaking tonight in support of extending the Innovation Fund tax credit by 5 years. Without this extension, this tax credit will sunset in June. This extension should result in minimal fiscal impact to the general fund. Our firm's sole purpose is investing in growing high-tech companies located in Iowa. Our investors have been utilizing these credits since 2013. Our investment firm was formed because of these credits and would not exist without them. To summarize our progress since the passage of the Innovation Fund tax credit legislation during the 2013 session, our fund has provided over $25 million of a private investment to 11 innovative Iowa companies, resulting in over 100 jobs, paying over $82,000, which is twice the median wage in our state. These companies are continuing to grow and will continue to add payroll in Iowa. Please understand that the Iowa Department of Revenue Tax Credit Contingent Liabilities Report issued in March of this year only projects about $1 million of awards in fiscal year 18. That is $1 million in credits that partially spurred over $25 million of private investment to date. Please also understand that I personally worked with a bipartisan group of legislators to pass the Innovation Fund credits in 2013. We put a 5-year sunset into the law to make sure it was working before it could be reauthorized. The program is working, and as a result, my fund is actively seeking more investors to supply more private dollars to more high-tech companies. However, if these credits cease to exist, we'll no longer be able to continue to invest in these types of growing Iowa ventures. The Innovation Fund credits, the angel tax credits, are important tools in building and growing our own high-tech companies here in Iowa and to stimulate investment into new technologies that need private capital in order to become successful. Your support in keeping these programs in place is greatly appreciated by the entrepreneurs in our great state. Thank you for your time.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Carl Schilling. I'm with the Iowa Organization for Victim Assistance, as well as the Iowa United Professionals / United Electrical Workers, and we represent state employees, primarily in human services. Human services, that's the place where workers currently are struggling with caseloads 3 and 4 times the recommended level. When people go into public service, they usually have 2 reasons. One of the reasons is not to get rich. But the 2 reasons are they want to help people and they want a secure job with benefits. Now, after what happened last year, the security is pretty much gone. As for being able to help people, that is eroding as well. Because as caseloads increase, as funds dwindle, as programs are cut or closed, the ability to help people also goes away. From what I can tell of what's before us now, this only helps 2 kinds: big business and Democratic candidates. The business credits you're talking about, there's scant evidence that they have created significant jobs in Iowa. It's hard to show that what jobs have created would not have been created otherwise. But it has bitten into our revenue. This will continue that as well. And the idea that these tax credits will create jobs, I think, is not based so much on evidence as an article of faith. Faith, as Mark Twain once defined it, believing what you know ain't so. The state needs the money. We are on our way to becoming Kansas and Oklahoma. We need to back up. We need to reverse course. It is late to do so, but I don't believe it is too late. We can create a system where there is a way to help people and a way to help the state employees help people. But you need the funds, and you cannot bleed this patient in order to cure it.
Sir, your time is up.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
My name is Terry Murfeld. I'm with I. Bailey, a certified public accounting firm that serves the regional area of Iowa. I'm based out of Des Moines, but I serve business clients statewide. I have clients in 62 of the 99 counties, most of which are small business pass-through entities, sole proprietors, Schedule F farmers, Subchapter S corporations, partnerships. That means all of their income passes through to their individual income tax return. I want to thank the legislature for the opportunity to comment on the tax reform. And I also want to thank Governor Reynolds for her leadership on the issue and her recognition of the need for a competitive 21st century tax code that reflects a changing 21st century economy. But whenever there is a major change in the federal tax code, as was signed into the law this past December, it also requires a well-thought-out response to the change in the state tax laws. In drafting this response, the initial objective should be adjustments to the Iowa Code that minimize the cost and complexity in maintaining and administering it on the state side, while also minimizing the cost and complexity in following those rules by the taxpayer and their professional advisors. First, maintain full conformity, which is what we would like to see, with the federal law makes it easier for the taxpayers and their advisors to comply without having to keep track of two separate sets of tax records for that taxpayer. The timing both this year and in the recent past of when tax laws are passed by the federal and state government creates significant difficulties in the filing season, as the software companies have a very short window of time to get their programming correct. Then it causes workload compression on the professional advisor. What that means is we're spending much more time late at night trying to get tax returns done, which causes the risk of higher points of errors on the tax returns. Maintaining the full conformity serves the interest of the state by reducing these items and promoting voluntary compliance. Secondly, the goal of eliminating federal deductibility, which is proposed in the bills, certainly has merit, but doing so without important conforming changes will unnecessarily create too many losers in the state tax code. In order to avoid a tax increase for many of Iowa's small businesses, it will be important to adopt the 20% qualified business income deduction, otherwise known as Section 199A of the federal tax code. It will also be important to set individual taxpayer rates at a level that will help mitigate the loss of the federal deductibility for Iowa's small businesses that are the job providers and drivers of Iowa's economy. The goal of tax reform in Iowa should be to stimulate our economy and complement what the federal government passed in December. You have a unique opportunity to do so this year by passing a tax reform bill that implements these important components. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, my name is John Steinman. I'm with the Iowa Chamber Alliance. I appreciate the opportunity to offer some brief remarks. With respect to the governor's tax bill that is under consideration at this hearing, the Chamber Alliance is supportive of the elements that would affect taxpayers filing an individual return or filing jointly. There are several very good aspects in there with its treatment with respect to federal deductibility, with the rate treatment that we think are on the right track toward making Iowa more competitive for the individual taxpayer. For businesses that file or businesses that are pass-throughs or LLCs typically, but where the income is paid by the individual, the business income is paid on the individual's tax return, which represents about 704,000 Iowa enterprises. There's very good treatment in here for qualified business income, for Section 179 expensing. These are things that are very important for those business owners, whether they're sole proprietors or whether they own a business in partnership with others. And we're very appreciative for that treatment and would urge you to keep that in the bill. That 704,000 Iowa businesses that file through pass-through represent about 38% of the payroll in the state of Iowa. 62% of the payroll that's paid in the state of Iowa is paid by C corporations. And these are not just giant corporations. In fact, 3 out of 4 businesses in the state of Iowa, 3 or 4 of the employees employed in the state of Iowa are done so by companies with less than 250 employees, 42% with those less than 50 employees. Many of these are C Corps, and so we do feel it's the appropriate thing to do to include corporate income tax in this proposal, to give it a treatment so we can also avoid the inadvertent tax increase by the federal tax reforms that were made in December, so businesses don't pay a price. We also have a long-standing ranking as having the highest tax rate in the country with respect to corporate at 12%. We all know federal deductibility makes that a little bit less. But even with that, our advertised rate is 12%. Guess what? If we were to knock it down to our second highest rate, we'd still be at the highest tax rate in the country. Because Pennsylvania's is 9.99 and they come in at third. So Iowa actually has the top 2 posts with respect to our corporate income tax rates. So I'd like to make sure that you all understand that this is just as equally important for small businesses as it is large businesses, even more so for small businesses so that they can expand their payroll, and those 62% of employees that work in C Corps get the chance to work for companies that are growing. And I'd remind you all that the last time we touched the corporate income tax code was in 1981. At that point in time, we raised taxes, the top bracket, from 10 to 12. And so I'd urge you to take action on addressing our corporate competitiveness. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Morgan Miller. I am with AFSCME Council 61. We represent public employees in the state, and those range from correctional officers to school bus drivers to DHS treatment workers. Our members are very much opposed to House Study Bill 671, and we ask that you consider the real consequences of passing this legislation. While our organization is not against cutting taxes, we feel that to do so at a time when our state is facing a financial crisis is both irresponsible and dangerous. Our state government is at a point where we have had to cut hundreds of millions of dollars from the state budget mid-year 2 consecutive years in a row to make up for repeated shortfalls in projected revenues. Last January, we passed Senate File 130, which cut the 2017 mid-year budget by $118 million. Last May, virtually every single state appropriation received millions of dollars in cuts. And just this last month, we passed Senate File 2117, which included $35 million in additional cuts to the current 2018 budget. All of these cuts were a result of revenue constraints, and they have a real impact on the services in our state, from public education to mental health care and to safety in our prisons. LSA has not completed their study on House Study Bill 671. However, if the price tag on this bill is estimated to be at $1.7 billion in revenue loss over the next 6 years, that means that hundreds of millions of dollars will be cut from annual revenues. We just struggled to cut $35 million from the current state budget. I can't comprehend how the legislature will handle the shortfalls and the shortfalls in revenue to the scale of $1.7 billion. Since 2011, we have closed mental health hospitals, we have closed Iowa workforce development offices, we've closed community-based corrections facilities, and we've continued to underfund our public schools. I can only imagine the impact that House Study Bill 671 will have on services that our state residents rely on. We ask that you slow down this process, consider the impacts of this bill, and ultimately stop moving this legislation forward. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stacy Post. I'm from Des Moines. I'm not here with any organization. I'm just here as an individual. I just have some short comments. I'm here to speak in support of the bill for a couple main reasons. First, tax reform works for the middle-class families. Under this plan, a family of 4 making $55,000 a year will see a 10% tax cut this year, and by 2023, that tax cut will be at 23%. The largest cuts are going straight to low and middle-income families, which is great. Second, the plan includes safeguards so that what happened in Kansas will not happen here. The plan is nearly revenue neutral as is because it utilizes extra revenue produced by the federal tax reform and passes those savings on to Iowans. We expect revenue to grow as a result of tax reform, but even if it doesn't, there are safeguards in place. Lastly, the plan creates an even playing field for all businesses. Iowa's Main Street businesses have always had to pay sales tax, and the governor's plan applies these same taxes to large online companies. For these reasons, I strongly support the governor's plan and urge you to do the same.
Hello, my name is Ken Sager. I have the privilege of serving as president of the Iowa Federation of Labor. We represent 540 union organizations and nearly 250,000 voting Iowans. We look at tax policy from several perspectives. One important litmus test that we apply to evaluating tax plans is, does this plan consider the taxpayer's ability to pay, or is it simply skewed towards cutting taxes for the wealthiest among us? We believe this bill represents the latter. Another litmus test is, does this tax plan generate sufficient resources to fund the legitimate needs of the citizens of this state? We believe that the most recent budget years, 2 in a row, we've seen budget cuts that have come mid-year. We see continuing struggles just to make a budget for next year. And that tends to indicate to us this tax policy will not meet this critical test. We have not been able to properly fund our schools for years now. We haven't been able to properly fund our mental health system for years. We haven't been able to properly fund and manage our Medicaid system for a number of years, and we haven't been staffing our corrections systems at a safe level. We don't believe that this tax policy will provide the funding necessary to meet the challenges of workforce shortages in a meaningful way. The first president of the American Federation of Labor, Samuel Gompers, once said, "What does labor want? We want more schoolhouses and less jails, more books and less arsenals, more learning and less vice, more leisure and less greed, more justice and less revenge. In fact, more opportunities to cultivate our better natures, to make manhood more noble, womanhood more beautiful, and childhood more bright and happy." The budget and this tax plan do not make sense if you're looking at both sides of the ledger. This tax plan will mean less schoolhouses. It will mean less books and less learning. This budget will not make kids' childhoods more happy and bright. This tax plan shifts a greater share of taxes paid from income tax to sales tax, and that always falls on those lower income people and is by our definition a regressive tax. As a result, this tax plan fails the litmus test for responsible tax plans, and we urge you to look at the entire picture when considering this tax plan, something that will provide for the legitimate needs in all Iowans, and we urge you to oppose this plan. Thank you.
Good evening, Drew Klein with Americans for Prosperity here in Iowa. We have long advocated for meaningful tax reform here in the state of Iowa and have had a number of principles that we think are important as we head down that road. Number one is it should provide meaningful relief to taxpayers in the state of Iowa, that it should be predictable, that it should be fair, that it treats all taxpayers alike, and maybe most importantly is that it produces real growth in the state of Iowa. We hear a lot of concern about the status quo and the current state of affairs here in Iowa, and most of that is really a result of poor growth in the state of Iowa. And so as we move forward, whether it be House Study Bill 671 as it exists right now, or if we can bring some more ideas to the table and continue to reform that, that should be the goal that lawmakers have in mind, is what are we going to do to bring meaningful growth to the state of Iowa and put more taxpayers back, more dollars back in taxpayers' pockets. And those are the things that we think are really fundamental. I reiterate again the same thing that I've heard from a number of lawmakers already. If we do nothing this year, we are in effect raising taxes on Iowans, and that should be unacceptable to all of us. But I spend a lot of time traveling throughout the state, and when you look at communities large and small, we've got to do something about the business tax environment, which really has us near dead last in the country. And if we're going to be serious about providing meaningful opportunities to Iowa families and individuals, we also have to do something about our uncompetitive individual rates, which certainly have a big impact on small business owners across the state as well. So we're certainly supportive of the governor's package. We think that there are a number of things that we can do to make that more meaningful, and we can do it in a responsible way. But I think it's also important to recognize if we do nothing, not only are taxes going up on Iowa businesses, Iowa individuals, Iowa families, but we will continue to struggle with the economic realities that we've been dealing with for several years. And for that reason, I urge you to take meaningful action and to make the eventual tax package that is passed this year bold. Certainly, it's not an option to do nothing. Thank you.
I'm Matt 80 with Uber Technologies, and I have two drivers here that are going to talk for most of the time. I just want to make a couple points. The bill includes a state sales tax on cabs and rideshare companies. This is a brand new tax. It's a service that's never been taxed before, so it's not such as you're trying to catch the tax code up to the new economy. Make no mistake, this is a brand new tax. And secondly, there's only been a handful of states in the country that have applied a state sales tax, and Iowa will be an outlier around the country for this service. And now I'm going to turn it over to two of our drivers.
Good afternoon. My name is Bonnie Stewart Kai, and I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I am an Uber driver from West Des Moines, and I've been a driver for approximately 3 years and 5 months. As a lifelong resident of Iowa, I have sometimes seen people struggle to make ends meet. Thanks to ride sharing, these people are able to bring in some income to take care of their families. I love driving with Uber because it allows me to set my own hours while earning money for my family. Plus, I feel like I'm giving back to my community by giving people rides wherever they need to go. I like to drive over the weekend because I like to know that people have safe rides home after enjoying a fun night on the town. Remember, Uber is just not for the affluent. There are people that use Uber on an everyday basis to get to work, to earn money, to go outside of their communities, which allows them a little bit more ability to earn higher wages. So don't forget that. Uber is for people that are unable to drive, maybe because they are immigrants, they're refugees, they can work in the United States, but maybe they don't have a license. So Uber is an opportunity to even the playing field for those that are trying to put food on the table for their families. So let's send the right message for companies like Uber to come to Iowa. Please vote no against passing a new sales tax on ride sharing and taxi trips.
My name is Mike Huguenin. I've been driving for Uber for over 2 years. I've driven about over 2,200 trips. I've always loved driving and I enjoy meeting new people. I drive most of the time from 5 o'clock in the morning till 9. And the people that I give a ride to, for example, last week I gave a ride to 3 single mothers taking children to daycare, then to school, and then on their way to work. 2 times a day, 5 times a week. If they're paying an extra amount of money on that, how long are they going to be able to do that? I have 3 people that I pick up occasionally that are blind. They can't drive. They don't have any other choice. I have another lady who drives from West Des Moines down to Central Lake 2 times a day. She can't drive. She has a disability. So those people cannot afford any more expenses. The other thing that...
Sir, I'm sorry, your collective time is up.
Okay, thank you. I urge you to vote no.
Go ahead, sir.
My name is Rebel Snodgrass. I'm from Warren County, and I'm here in support of the bill. We absolutely need to address the taxes. To do nothing at all would be the same as increasing taxes. With the federal government lowering taxes and being coupled with Iowa with the deductibility, then we would absolutely have to pay more taxes in December at the end of the year. So we do need to address that. I have a business here in the state. I work really hard at being competitive and paying my people fair. And we have the highest corporate rate in the United States of America. It is the absolute highest corporate rate in this country, right here in Iowa. That's offensive to me, and I want to see it changed. We have the second highest rate on individual taxes out of the 14 Midwestern states. It's too high. You want to grow the economy, you want to bring businesses to the state, you need to lower taxes. And so I'm here to ask you to vote yes and to do just that. That's really all I have to say.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to thank the committee for allowing a public hearing on the important issue of tax
Could you
reform.
state your name for the record, please?
My name is Peg Scott. I'm CEO of Union State Bank in Greenfield, Iowa. I'm also incoming chair of the Iowa Bankers Association, which is a trade group that represents 315 Iowa banks that serve as hubs for economic growth in every county and nearly every town in Iowa. I am here because the future of our locally owned community institutions are challenged by an antiquated tax law that has government picking winners and losers in the financial services marketplace. I started as a teller in my bank 38 years ago and worked my way up to CEO. In 2007, the family owners of the bank decided to retire and sell. A small group of employees and members of our community, including myself, understood the importance of having a locally owned financial institution. So we made the decision to put our own savings and equity at risk to buy the bank. So I guess I'm one of those evil stockholders that the credit union industry so often talks about. It took us 10 years before we were able to pay off the bank stock loan and actually start paying a return on the investment. But we did. And now our community continues to have the benefit of a locally owned bank. My bank and most of Iowa's 300 community banks are much smaller and much less profitable than any of the big credit unions that would be subject to income tax under the language of the Senate bill. The bill creates a two-tiered system of taxation designed to protect small credit unions and support small banks, both of whom are threatened by large credit unions that we compete against. In Iowa, just 3 credit unions produced 72% or $132 million of total credit union profits in 2017. These credit unions are the only credit unions that would see any significant tax increase from this proposed new tax structure. The remainder of Iowa credit unions would pay about the same as or less than they do today. The credit union industry has been dramatizing the impact of a tax that would amount to 3.6% or $4.8 million. So instead of $132 million in profits, these 3 credit unions would have $127 million in profits. For every dollar my bank earns, we pay almost 30 cents in state and federal income tax, and that's after the federal tax reduction. Yet I have to remain competitive in my pricing or I lose the business to one of those mega credit unions that doesn't have to pay income tax. These large credit unions are using their government advantage to solicit deposits statewide in rural communities where they have no locations within 100 miles of these communities. They then use these high net worth deposits from rural Iowa to fund loans to high-income areas such as West Des Moines and Iowa City.
Ma'am, I'm sorry your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, my name is Steve Marlowe. I'm from West Des Moines. I represent the Iowa Society of CPAs. First of all, I want to thank the committee for the monumental effort of moving this large piece of legislation down the tracks. I'm here really today to speak on one issue, and that's conforming the state tax law to the federal tax law. At the present time, or at least as a part of the membership of the Iowa Society, we deal on an annual basis with the fact of conformity or coupling, as it sometimes is referred to, and oftentimes waiting for several months. And while this piece of legislation does add some level of permanence to that conformity, we would like to request that it consider moving to total conformity. Things like bonus depreciation, the 179 adjustment, merely move revenues from one period to the other, but it increases the complexity and the cost of both the taxpayer and the individual state itself through its ability to or inability to audit through the federal means. So I'm here to ask you to reconsider whether or not you could just go with straight conformity with federal tax legislation. And also, you know, many times you look and say, well, it's only 2 sets of records. Well, it's a lot more than that because there are 50 states. There's GAAP financial statements, there's tax financial statements for federal purposes, and for the multi-state corporations, you add every level of state taxes imaginable. So all we're trying to do is request that you make it a little bit simpler. And contrary to what many people think, CPAs do prefer a simple method when it's available to us. So that's all I have to say. I want to thank you for your time. And again, thank you for your efforts in this area.
I'm Mike Olson with Lincoln Savings Bank in Grinnell, Iowa. Again, thank you to the members for this opportunity to be here today. I want to address arguments we hear coming from the credit union lobby about why Iowa businesses, including banks, should have to pay income tax on profits, but credit unions should not. Their advertisements say that their rates on their loans will skyrocket if they have to pay tax. But every tax-paying business, including banks, has to pay income tax and still have to find a way to compete in the marketplace. For every dollar my bank as a C corporation earns, it pays 26 cents in income tax, and yet I have to compete with credit unions that pay 0 income tax and use that advantage to cherry pick the most desirable loans and deposits. The credit union lobby also argues that the federal government recently gave banks and all other businesses a tax cut in the recently passed Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that credit unions didn't get. But you can't lower taxes on a business that doesn't pay any. You don't have to be a banker to know that nothing from nothing is still nothing. For the credit union trade publications, they even celebrated the federal tax bill, calling it, quote, a huge victory for credit unions because it left their 10-year, $35 billion federal tax income subsidy untouched. The credit union lobby also asserts that these large credit unions will simply switch from a state charter to a federal charter so they can avoid paying any state income tax. But that's not possible because the geographic and regulatory requirements of a federally chartered credit union are more stringent than that of an Iowa state chartered credit union, so that's not going to be possible. Large credit unions in Iowa simply do not qualify, and a recent U.S. District Court ruling confirmed this restriction. Credit unions are also claiming that Iowa would be the first state to tax banks and credit unions alike. Iowa would, in fact, be the 6th state to do that, joining the states of Missouri, Nebraska, Indiana, Oklahoma, and Utah. Our neighbor to the west, Nebraska, taxes credit unions and banks the same rate based on deposits. And that has not prevented Veridian Credit Union from recently jumping the state line and entering the Omaha market with 4 new offices. Finally, credit union members are not owners. They have no legal or equitable claim to the net worth of a credit union. When a member closes a deposit account, they get the balance in the account, just like they would at a bank. They're not entitled to any of the profits or equity of the credit union itself. Iowa taxpayers are weary of picking up the tab for this subsidy, and the majority of which flows to just 3 big credit unions. It's telling that these same credit unions are fighting so hard against this modest tax, which would support Iowa communities. Iowa lawmakers need to be the voice for all of the Iowa families who may not be here today, but have the most to lose if this growing subsidy continues. It's time to end the free ride for the big credit unions. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Mike Ralston. I'm with the Iowa Association of Business and Industry, and thank you for your service, and thanks for the opportunity to comment tonight. Many of you know ABI represents 1,500 member companies that employ more than 330,000 Iowans. We have members involved in all industries, manufacturing, utilities, financial services, distribution, warehousing, environmental compliance, you name it. The reason I share that is because you can imagine that all those folks have chosen different tax classifications for their companies. So we have members who are C corporations, S corporations, LLCs, partnerships, and even sole proprietors, and we appreciate that. And so with all those folks, we've sought to get a lot of member feedback. We're getting that now, but it's pretty clear that 3 issues are on the minds of ABI members more than others as you all work through issues involving tax reform in Iowa. The first of those 3 issues relates to a new federal reform found in Section 199A of the Internal Revenue Code, the Qualified Business Income Deduction. In the federal bill that passed last year, QBI set at 20%, a deduction of 20% on a taxpayer's return. In Section 9 of the bill before you, the House bill, the amount of the QBI deduction is 5%. As some other folks have talked about, we value coupling state and federal tax policy, and we hope you look at the QBI as one of the places to do that. The second big issue members are concerned about is rates, of course, and people are talking about rates lower than 6.9% for individuals. We hope you'll consider tax reform too. We hope you'll do it now, if not now, in the future, tax reform for corporations. Most importantly, though, ABI members talk about the thoughtfulness and safeguards in the House proposal, specifically the revenue triggers that provide for sustainability in the state budget while also providing for reform and reduction. Lastly, the third issue is that ABI supports modernization of the sales tax code in Iowa to reflect 21st century commerce. Whether you buy something on the square in Fairfield in person or you buy that same product online, they ought to be taxed the same. So QBI, corporate reform and triggers, and sales tax modernizations are the issues that our members talk about most now. And again, we just want to say thank you for your consideration. Thanks for the opportunity to present these remarks.
Hello, my name is Sue Daly. I'm from Walcott Trust and Savings Bank in Walcott, Iowa. I'm a small rural bank right on the eastern edge in Scott County, which is by the Quad City Market. I'm here today because I want to let you know that my bank is about $123 million. That's about, in perspective, 36 times smaller than University of Iowa Community Credit Union. We've been in our market for about 85 years, so been around a very long time. I wanted to come and speak today because University of Iowa Credit Union has moved into the Davenport market, which is about 10 minutes away from us. This large credit union, as you heard, had net income last year of over $70 million. In retrospect, our bank had net income last year of around $700,000. Our business model is very simple. We take deposits in and we lend that money back out. We've been doing that for, like I said, 85 years. We do invest in our community. The profits that we make, we invest back into our community. For example, last year in Walcott, of the town of about 1,500 people, we donated $50,000 to the local Scott County Library so that we could move buildings and quadruple the size of our existing library for our community. We've also donated thousands of dollars to our local school in Walcott for a new computer lab. That was tough when the schools are cutting budgets. We're there for them in our community. Coming into the Quad City Market, the credit union built a brand new building in our area on the most expensive real estate that you can find in Davenport. Their first order of business was to start advertising, canvassing on the radio, TV, newspapers, including a rural paper, the North Scott Press, to simply state that they'll beat any rate out there. Just tell us what you're getting paid and we'll beat it. That's their advertising campaign. That brought and took a $900,000 CD out of our bank. We couldn't compete with that. When we lose deposits, we lose the ability to lend the money back out, and our customers are predominantly ag customers and small business customers. Has had a huge impact on how we do business. I share this incident with you because when a handful of Iowa's large urban credit unions can and use their substantial government tax advantage to solicit high net worth customers, depositors statewide, it ultimately is very harmful for our bank and our community to do business. Another point I want to make is credit unions will tell you that they are financial cooperatives, so they should not have to pay income tax. Cooperatives do pay income tax on earnings that they retain and do not distribute back to their members.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First, I want to thank you for giving me a chance to hear my views.
Give us your name, please.
My name is Biker Mark Carter. I'm a pastor with Biker Mark Ministries Incorporated. We counsel abused, molested kids and feed the poor. Last Sunday, we fed over 300 homeless a great ham dinner. We do that twice a month. I have a degree in psychology with a minor in theology from Grandview University. I am in touch with the poor and middle-class people daily. I must say the poor are not poor because of taxes. Actually, taxes help them live daily. No one likes to pay taxes, just like no one likes to tithe. But both are necessary to carry out the programs that the state and the churches have to and want to take care of their people. Let's face it, as some well-known people said, you cannot please all the people all the time. This is why this country, in my view, was built to best serve the majority, but not forget the minority or the poor. I ask God to bless all of you in this great state of Iowa.
I'm Kurt Herbergsmeyer, President of First Security Bank and Trust in Charles City, Iowa. I'm also the current chairman of the Iowa Bankers Association. We're a family-owned bank located in north central and northeast Iowa with about $500 million in total assets. Our bank is substantially smaller than any of the credit unions that would see a modest income tax increase as outlined in the Senate tax reform bill. In the towns that my bank serves, there's one small credit union. We have a good working relationship with them, and we believe they provide a valuable service to our community. For this reason, the IBA is advocating that the Iowa House add language to the governor's bill that would apply a modest state income tax to large credit unions that make significant profits. Smaller credit unions, such as the one in my community, would see no change or even a reduction in their tax liability. The language in the Senate bill creates a unitary tax for all financial institutions. It would tax income over $7.5 million at 4% and income below that at 2%. It also eliminates the money and credits tax that the credit unions currently pay, which amounts to 1/2 of 1%. But right now it is based on the credit union's capital rather than its income. The money and credits tax creates a disadvantage for small credit unions in that they owe it even if they don't make a profit, and many of them do not. In their advertising, these large credit unions are threatening to increase rates and fees on their own members if subject to this modest tax change. One large credit union has even gone so far as to suggest to local charities that it will be reconsidering its support of them if they don't contact their legislator in opposition of this legislation. Meanwhile, Iowa's 300 community banks pay nearly $360 million in total local, state, and federal taxes annually, and are still able to contribute more than $53 million to community and charitable organizations and remain competitive on interest rates in their marketplace. In fact, according to call report data, when we compare Iowa banks to Iowa credit unions, Iowa banks pay the same overall rates on deposits, Iowa banks offer better rates on loans, and Iowa banks charge lower total fees. These statistics demonstrate that there are large credit unions that are not using their tax-exempt structure to benefit their members. They're using it to support rapid growth, including statewide advertising aimed at high net worth individuals, depositors in rural areas like mine, building expensive buildings in high-income metropolitan areas like West Des Moines and Iowa City, and paying very high executive salaries. We ask that it's time for the legislature to right this inequity. We ask that you add the Senate language to HSB 619. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me time to speak to you tonight. I am Michael Triplett, and I am Legislative Counsel to the Iowa Funeral Directors Association. On behalf of the hundreds of small businesses that make up our membership, we are encouraged by the discussion for relief for corporate and personal income tax payers. The changes that came down from Washington late last year are having a positive impact on the bottom lines of small businesses throughout Iowa, and we hope the momentum can continue with significant state-level reform. In addition, I'd like to bring to your attention an issue that, although it is small, is very important to our members. When we sell a pre-need funeral plan with funds invested in a trust, the income that the plan gains is subject to Iowa state income tax. The problem is that the person setting up the pre-need does not have access to the funds, nor do they get to spend this growth. The whole point of pre-need is that a person is setting aside assets for the benefit of others. However, Iowa's tax code assumes the opposite and taxes this growth of the fund. It is unfair, and we would encourage you to fix this. This is a hassle for taxpayers who have sacrificed assets for the sake of their families. They get a K-1 every spring, reminding them that they need to pay tax on money they no longer hold. The amounts are minuscule, and the impact on the general fund is minor. Also, it would level the playing field between these trust products and a pre-need life insurance policy, the growth of which is not taxable. The Iowa Senate addressed this problem on page 10, lines 9 through 11 of Senate File 2383. We would encourage the Iowa House to include this fix in their ongoing discussions on the parameters of the tax reform package. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Jennison, and I'm representing Trans Iowa that does business as Yellow Cab and Capital Cab here in Des Moines and Central Iowa. And Yellow Cab Company provides, on average, nearly 1,900 trips a week for elderly, disadvantaged, and differently abled Iowans. For many of these at-risk Iowans, a taxi cab is their primary source of transportation to the grocery store, to doctor's appointments, and to work. A sales tax on taxi cabs is in reality a tax on the elderly, poor, and differently abled. So we are here tonight to advocate on behalf of the at-risk Iowans, many of whom are taxi cab customers, and urge that you not support these provisions of the income tax bill that would impose a sales tax on taxi cabs. Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Joe Hearn. I'm president of DuPaco Community Credit Union based in Dubuque, Iowa. It's my honor to speak with you on behalf of 1.1 million credit union members who are owners of their own financial cooperatives. Thank you, Governor Reynolds, for designing a tax reform that aligns with what credit unions do, help Iowans keep more of their hard-earned money. As the legislature considers tax reform, and a self-serving banker push to cut their own taxes while raising taxes on Iowa's credit union members, please bear in mind, credit unions do pay taxes. Iowa credit unions pay property tax, sales tax, and payroll taxes, plus a monies and credits tax on reserves that banks don't pay. Credit unions are taxed differently than banks because credit unions are different. Different purpose, different structure. This difference was not recognized in the Senate bill, which proposed a 35% tax increase on DuPaco's 105,000 homegrown members and over 600,000 Iowa credit union members. Banks exist to maximize profit for stockholders. No matter the size, credit unions exist to provide access to affordable credit, encourage habits of thrift, and to provide the opportunity for members to use and control their own money on a democratic basis in order to improve their economic and social condition. And you can find this exact definition in Iowa code. Bank customers have no control. Credit union members have an equal vote in their cooperative, no matter how much money they have in the credit union. Iowa credit unions return more than $100 million annually to members through better rates and fewer fees compared to what they would have paid for similar services at a bank. During the past 2 years, DuPaco members also earned an additional $6 million in patronage dividends. We'll do it again this year. While banks will cherry-pick profitable commercial loans and borrowers with pristine credit scores, credit unions are consumer-focused. 40% of Iowa credit union loans are made to members with below-average credit scores. Banks have 90% market share in Iowa. They've enjoyed 6 years of record profits. Things do seem to be working. Instead of targeting credit unions, Iowa banks should focus their concerns on big national banks that are growing rapidly and control 1/4 of the deposits in Iowa. Credit unions provide an important Iowa-based alternative to these out-of-state mega banks, as well as the growing number of branchless internet banks. If credit union taxes are increased, the state of Iowa could in fact see less tax revenue because credit unions could convert to a federal charter as they did in Utah.
Sir, your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Ron Corbett. I'm here representing Engage Iowa. Engage Iowa is a conservative think tank, and one of the issues that we've studied over the last several years is income tax modernization. So I'm here to speak concerning the bill that's in front of you here in the next several days.
There's, first of all, 3 areas of caution I'd like to point out for you and then maybe give a couple of suggestions. The first area of caution is taxing the new economy. Don't do that. Don't tax the new economy. One of the reasons the new economy has thrived is because government hasn't regulated and taxed it. So don't tax our apps, Netflix, Hulu, Apple TV, Spotify, Pandora. These are all services that come through either your cable TV, your cell phone, or your internet. We already pay a tax on that of 6%. So this is really double taxation to pay 6% on our phone bills, our internet, and our cable, and then pay an additional 6% on the services that come through. That's 12%. You know, as a conservative think tank, when you want to stimulate something, you lower the taxes. When you want to strangulate something, you increase the taxes. And I know that many people are concerned about broadband access around the state of Iowa, in particular the rural areas. So don't tax our apps and don't tax the new economy. Point number 2, in the governor's bill, there's no corporate income tax reduction, and that is a good thing. I agree with the governor that this isn't the year for corporate income tax cuts or reduction. Save that for next year or for some later year. See, corporations just got a big tax cut at the federal level. They went from 35% down to 21%. And our big problem in Iowa is we don't have enough people. We have 70 out of 99 counties losing population. More people are retiring, leaving the back door, than coming in the front door. So we have to make our state more welcoming from a personal income tax standpoint. So every dollar that you divert to corporate income taxes is one less dollar you're going to have for individual income taxes. And unlike the federal government, you can't print money. So any dollars that you allocate towards tax relief, you have to show a corresponding reduction on the expense side. So taking valuable resources and applying it to corporate income taxes would be a mistake, and I support the governor on that and focus on individual income taxes. The third point of caution is this concept of trigger language. And I'm not really sure why people seem to be supportive of that. I don't know if it's a little bit of groupthink. But you take one area of complex aspect of our tax code, which is federal deductibility. It's complicated. Federal deductibility, there's an asterisk. We have a high tax rate, but you have federal deductibility, you lower it, your effective rate. You have to explain it to people. Sir, I'm sorry, your time is up. All right, thank you.
Good evening, Chairman and members. My name is Joe Lidke. I am a senior consultant with corporate and legislative affairs at CUNA Mutual Group. I'm here to offer support for the governor's and this committee's work to provide a measure of tax relief to the hardworking families of this great state. CUNA Mutual Group is a proud Iowa domiciled insurance company providing insurance and financial services to 95% of all credit unions and many of the credit union members here in Iowa and across the entire country. Our company, born of the credit union movement in 1935, is dedicated to serving credit union community by providing access to individual life insurance products, credit insurance, retirement solutions, and wealth management services. In total, we protect more than 17 million credit union members across the country. The credit union system provides good jobs to this state. CUNA Mutual Group, with $20.6 billion in assets and $3.5 billion in total revenue alone, employs nearly 550 Iowans in our location in Waverly, Iowa. Our employees in Waverly are tremendous, they're dedicated, and they serve credit union members each and every single day. We want to extend our appreciation to the governor and this body for their efforts to develop a responsible, pro-growth tax policy. Thoughtful measures like HSB 671 will allow Iowa to maintain its position as the best state in the country, according to U.S. News and World Report. As you continue your deliberations, we strongly urge you to continue to reject any new taxes on Iowa credit unions and the 600,000 member owners who would bear that burden. Credit unions are organized as financial cooperatives and are not-for-profit institutions. The cooperative structure means that credit unions return more than $100 million annually to their members through better rates and fewer fees, compared to what they would pay for similar services in a bank. Because credit unions are member-owned, they are socially responsible, and they exist solely to serve their members and their local communities. The public policy impact of a new tax on the retained earnings of credit unions and their members is far-reaching, and it has implications far beyond the borders of Iowa. Last month, the national publication of the American Banker wrote a headline titled, "Tax Credit Unions, Iowa Bill Could Lead the Way." We are perplexed that Iowa's strong defense of local financial institutions and cooperatives would somehow lead one to conclude that local credit unions should be subjected to a new tax as proposed in the Senate bill. As a financial institution, we are well aware of the marketplace and the challenges local financial institutions face in competing with larger national players, especially in an economy of scale and in capital and technology. At a national level, the 100 largest banking institutions control 74.9% of the assets in America, which is up 41.1% since 1992. And these institutions continue to amass more and more market share every single year. Every credit union in Iowa faces these challenges, and we would encourage you to pursue public policy measures that help credit unions keep capital in the state of Iowa and serve members with affordable products and services. Thank you for protecting our local credit unions across the state and their 1.1 million members by rejecting any new taxes on them. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. It looks like I am one of the last ones, so I'll try to keep it brief for all you guys. But my name is Chase Kuzel. I'm currently a sophomore at Iowa State University, and the governor's tax reform plan will directly impact small business owners, just like my mother and father, by providing them the much needed tax cuts that they need. Under this plan, say a typical family of four making $55,000 will see a 10% tax cut, and by 2023 they'll see an additional 23% tax cut. That means that these cuts are going towards those hardworking middle-class families that really need it the most. It modifies the sales tax and uses those increased revenues that resulted from the federal government's tax reform to lower those rates. This plan also eliminates federal deductibility so that the Iowa state taxes will not go up because of a federal tax plan. This gives multiple people peace of mind for their future here in Iowa and the money that they're going to have coming in. It's because of all these reasons that I just listed, and because of the positive impact that it would make on my family, and not only my family, but families across the state of Iowa, that I encourage you to support this important piece of legislature. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I know, I didn't even open it. Hey.
I like mine. Yeah.
Oh, mercy. Yeah.